What's up, traders? Matt from the Trade Brigade here with your weekend crypto report, where as always I do a technical analysis and give you my thoughts on the coins listed up above for the 2 days where our beloved stock market is closed, aka the weekend, right? So let's start off by jumping into a couple of daily charts. I just want to walk through first and then we'll talk more nuance on the 4-hour. But in terms of relative strength, relative weakness, there's clearly been an explosion in Litecoin and Ethereum over the past couple of days. And again, I just wanted to highlight that from a larger perspective, daily time frame chart, and not so much just from the 4-hour, which we typically look at. So for now, noticing that we are consolidating here, which again is striking me as price acceptance around these areas after making the move up and out of this overall range from the daily. So decent relative strength here inside of Bitcoin. Flipping over to something like Litecoin, again, you can clearly see that we are moving out of this overall range that we were stuck in for quite some time with authority headed into Friday here. So definitely better strength inside of Litecoin. Now, I'm not saying that to say, buy Litecoin versus Bitcoin that might be chasing at this point in time, but I'm just, again, trying to give you a broad picture before we dive down into that 4-hour time frame. Ethereum, again, a huge explosive movement in the latter half of the week outside of this pennant pattern that we had put in. So if you were watching that, good breakout happening here. Cardano brings me to my next one, which is a little bit stagnant, and that's fine because really this one has had the relative strength baton for so long. I mean, just look at this compared to everything we just talked about, which is barely, just starting to break out of this range in terms of relative comparison, right? So I would say it's okay that Cardano is giving the other coins some time to shine, essentially. Then we'll get into some of the, altcoins here. The Dogecoin obviously just going sideways, nowhere near the peak high and peak euphoria over here. Ripple actually looking okay, right? Moving out of this overall range and starting to form a really healthy looking, actually, cup and handle pattern. The reason we like this consolidation here is, of course, because it's above the prior area from in here, and then we'll finish it up with Stellar, and noting that although it is certainly starting to form that cup and handle, not quite as healthy, noting that this consolidation is not quite as high or even above this prior area from in there. So just a quick broad overview from the daily perspective. Now let's drill down and give you some more nuanced thoughts, some potential trade ideas here from the 4-hour time frame chart. So looking at Bitcoin, clearly, as we discussed in last week's video, it had more overhead supply to essentially work through in this area of the chart, and it has since done a really good job of doing that. Bull flag here, breaking out. I would say as long as this remains above $50,000 per coin, continue to have a bullish outlook inside of Bitcoin, and I would argue the next break is really going to be a doubling of this range here. And if we just scrunch this chart up for target's sake, we have 53,134. As we know, that comes from daily structure, scrunching this way up. This isn't too pretty to look at, but you can see if I do something like that, there's where that number is coming from. So prior support, 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 support in here as well. So that's why we think that should act as resistance going forward if we can clear that 51,300 mark. And then obviously after that, it's really this larger range to contend with. We would monitor for continuation up into 60K. I'm not trying to say it gets there all in one day, all in one weekend, all in one week, month, so on and so forth. But that's really the next major point of contention that we can see from that 4-hour perspective. So things do look good for more upside. Again, if we break underneath 50,000, start to raise some more question marks, what that might start to be would be more of a look above and fail, in which case we have this range that would be a look above, fail back down under 50K, give or take. I would argue the target should be the bottom end down here around $47,477 per coin. Next up, we'll take a look at Litecoin. As we know, this one was exhibiting extreme relative strength, breaking out of this balance which we had here, and just based on a quick doubling rule, obviously we have fulfilled that upside target. I would say not the time to be chasing Litecoin right now. You really want to get in on some sort of pullback. That way you have a risk-friendly entry. You put your stop underneath pullback lows and then wait for that next continuation move higher. So again, not really encouraging you to just blindly be a buyer up here, rather waiting for some structure and then making an educated decision. One thing I do like doing whenever we're dealing with large expansions of range is taking out the Fibonacci's from low to high, and you can see that the 38.2 pullback happens to be around 204, and that would be the first, ideal place that we see some sort of pullback happen to, and then a reversal out of. Again, that's an ideal world, but I would say as long as it holds structure as well, this white line here that we have, let's just call it $200 for splitting some round numbers sake. As long as we remain above 200 on the pullback, I would argue that's a healthy and well-respected pullback. You would want to see volume die off when that does happen to ensure that sellers aren't really grabbing a foothold and just, maybe there's some profit taking going on. So Litecoin still does look phenomenal to the upside. If we break out over this high, let's clean that up. Next overhead target is really way up there at $240 per coin. Next up, we'll take a look at Ethereum. As we know, this one has been moving as well. Large things, well, not large, but a lot of big projects happening in the NFT space, which may be driving prices of Ethereum as well. They kind of work in tandem, right? And we clearly are starting to see a breakout of this 4-hour bull flag in here. So that does strike me as healthy. As long as we hold this 38.36 on any back tests like that, continue to have a bullish outlook, looking for reversals to take us higher into the next overhead target from the daily perspective, which is at 42.16 and then 43.77, scrunching the chart up so you can see where that's coming from. We'll make it auto. Again, we're not cherry picking the high first. We really want to be aware of that 42.16 coming in from that cluster before, and then of course the all-time high after that here inside of Ethereum. If we give up the this on the pullback, right, and we break back down underneath, I wouldn't be so interested in buying this and really wait to see what happens at 35.82 instead. Next up, we have Cardano, and again, this one is giving the relative strength baton off to Litecoin and Ethereum clearly, but one thing I would encourage you to do is maybe look at this as a support trend line and just note that we're riding this, right? As long as we remain above it, continue to have a bullish outlook, looking for breakouts over this most recent pivot high around $3.05. You can look at the decimals here on the screen. So breakout does ensue over that into blue sky territory. So there's no real saying how high this could go, you know, where the pullback will come from. You're just monitoring for continuation in that case. On a sideways break here of that support trend line, which we just outlined, it's not the worst case, right? Obviously, if it starts breaking it aggressively through price, that's a different story. But if it goes sideways through it, it's not the end of the world. It just wouldn't be in play so much anymore. And instead, you just wait, you know, to see what type of consolidation forms. Does it respect this 292 area? Or again, does it start breaking down further? In which case, the line in the sand, as we know, has to be kind of in here around that $2.73 mark. Ideally, though, it does consolidate sideways in this range and then catch up with the rest of the coins by seeing a breakout. Again, just it's a trade idea. It doesn't mean it has to happen, but that's ideally how you would play Cardano in this situation. Next up, we'll go on over to the Dogecoin and look at it a little bit more granularly than just from that daily perspective. Clearly just going sideways, not exhibiting as much relative strength, but if you just think about trend continuation, we certainly have a big L down here from major low. This, of course, would be your next higher low, and as long as we hold on to this general area in here, I would consider this a higher low. The next obvious step for uptrend continuation would be taking out these highs and then forming a new higher high. So looking for the breakout up and over about 0.3071, because obviously we're trading, you know, sub 50 cents even. It is important to note these decimals here to be technical with your entries. And the next target that I'm really seeing from this perspective here would just be up in this area around 0.3266. So that's how we're looking at Dogecoin. Could see upside continuation, right? If people are getting re-excited about crypto, if Litecoin and Ethereum really spark some new interest, that could certainly be on the table for the course of the long weekend. Next up, we're going to take a look at Ripple. Again, this one is showing some decent relative strength from that daily perspective, just showing you that consolidation one more time above the prior highs in here. So that does strike me as bullish. Again, really seeing the opportunity arise at the top end of the range or the bottom end of the range. Of course, we're at the top in this instance. So the first thing I'd love to see, we already did get a small pullback here. So I'd love to see maybe one more higher low. Love to see it hold this 1.288 and then boom, a breakout of the range to take us into some next overhead daily targets, which in this case, we don't have any mapped out. From a doubling perspective, let's do this first. So this is our range. Ideally, when we break out of a range, we double that to the upside, and it just so happens to coincide if we just move this over to the right here. Actually, not sure. Can that move? Okay, so you can't see it behind that USD, but it's 1.55. So $1.55 to the upside would make a range doubling target there. Let's clean that up and now zoom way back out. Do something like this to see if there's any structure that we can really contend with from way back here. And what are we seeing? Maybe 1.55 makes sense, right? If we do something like this, hover the cursor, and 1.55 would be right about here. You can see that is aligned with some prior structure. So that does strike me as a reasonable target, but maybe before we get there, we see a small bump in the road around some of this midpoint, right around 1.44. So please keep that in mind if you do decide to trade the Ripple here and we get that situation ultimately playing out. If we give up 1.288, then look for lower, probably to come back down into that 1.22. I would really expect chop or maybe some sort of support, better support here in the midpoint of the range for maybe a major higher low, and then something like that. That, of course, would be respecting a trend line that could be formed with anchor here and touch one right here. Next up, we'll wrap up the video with Stellar here. And this one, again, it's probably not the best choice, in my opinion, for one of these coins to trade. Clearly some good volume coming down as the breakout has been happening across crypto. But for now, We did see the pullback already. Now we're breaking out, making a new higher high. If we do get continuation, monitor for a pullback to now form at 0.385, right? If we get something like this, ideally it forms above our 0.3681, but there is, room to essentially pull back to here, do something like that, thus getting uptrend continuation. Really, the breakout happens over 0.3858 simply because we have all of these touches from in the past that will start to act as a small pressure cooker top there, should take us into this next major area of resistance at 0.4039. So this one, I mean, it does have some merit, but just remember that it's not quite as relatively strong as the rest of our coins. The last thing I want to mention is something that someone brought up in the Discord, which is BTC.D, which is going to show us the dominance of Bitcoin here. And I thought it was really interesting, just something that I might, share with you guys before wrapping the video up. And all this is going to do is just show us the Bitcoin market cap versus the rest of the coins that are out there. And right now you can clearly see that it's in a slide lower, which just means more smaller coins out there are getting acceptance. Bitcoin isn't dominating the crypto market so much. And I think that's interesting, right? So although Bitcoin is seen as the godfather of crypto, there are certainly a lot of opportunities popping up across the crypto space. And this is certainly backing that theory. So if you enjoyed today's video, if you learned something new about crypto, let me know down below in the comments section or by giving the video a thumbs up. Don't forget it's a long weekend, so you can trade this stuff on Monday as the stock market is closed. And with that being said, I wish you all a green trading week.